So we are in the introduction of the Tanya. Specifically in the introduction, we are in the letter that the Alter Rebbe sent as the Tanya was being printed. As again, we know the backdrop. The Alter Rebbe took approximately 20 years to write the Tanya, and then 3+ years to give it over to his followers. He's giving it over orally. He doesn't want it to come down to the physicality of like paper and for sure not printed works. But then, as we're going to discuss, probably not today, perhaps, probably not, mistakes crept in, the accidental and unfortunately the deliberate errors that were implanted to discredit the Tanya and to discredit the Hasidic movement, because of which the Alter Rebbe said, okay, so to speak, I give in. We are going to actually print this. So then nobody will be able to touch it, and nobody will be able to utilize the Tanya for the opposite, to discredit Hasidus, to discredit the Hasidim. That took approximately 3-some years until from when, all right, we really have to start printing it, and then we have to review everything. We have to edit out all the mistakes. We have to get all the necessary permits. And Tsarist Russia to print a holy work was not simple at all. And many, many miracles happened. So in other words, this is all taking time. And this is very public knowledge. And the Hasidim, as we said, were like, we don't want the Tanya printed. I mean, the Tanya is amazing. We're learning the Tanya. We're studying the Tanya. We go to the Rebbe and we hear the next chapter, the next installment, and the next installment, and the next installment. And it's amazing. And we're so eager when anyone comes from where the Alter Rebbe was in Liadi to tell us, so we can get from them the next handwritten notes that they had because they were there when the Rebbe said it. We're so excited, and we insist they stay in the town long enough, because the shtetl long enough, because we all have to copy it, and then we make copies from the copies, and we make copies from the copies. This is how the mistakes crept in, the accidental ones. So we love it. We're excited, but you're actually going to put it out as like a book that then you're going to tell us, oh, what are you asking me? Go to my book. What are you asking me? I already wrote your answer. What are you asking me? Go study it. We don't want that. We want a Rebbe. And how in the world can a book help us? How can one book reach all of our needs? Good question. The Rebbe says that's a great problem. That's a great complaint. Let me unpack that a bit. So in this letter, which of course is sent really as explanation and reassurance to the Hasidim, the Rebbe begins, and we're towards the end of that section of the letter, explaining at length why they're completely right. It makes no sense. A book can't reach everyone where they are. Why not? Well, first of all, because if you're in the darkness, it's very unlikely that you're going to get touched by the book, because you're in the darkness, you're not even going to appreciate it. And if you do have a good mind, and you are not sitting in such darkness, and you are opened to the spirituality, still, how can one book work for all of us when we are all so different? And the Rebbe proved that. He gave a proof from Yeshua, from Joshua. He gave a proof from a blessing. The blessing will say by Mashiach, Chacham Harazim, God as the wise one of the secrets, because every Jew is a secret, because every Jew is different. So we're all so different. It's not going to work. And we said, in a regular work, in a work of human mind, in a work of human mind with divine inspiration, even in divine inspiration, it's going to reach all of us. And even in Torah, where we truly all are found. But do we merit to know where we are found in Torah? And now, and this is what we were in the middle of discussing, the Rebbe says, and honestly, we can look in the realm of action. And even in the realm of action, we disagree. Which is like, how can we disagree? It's an action, but we disagree. Some great, wise, brilliant, holy sages look at it as one way, and others, equally great, wise, brilliant, and holy, look at it a different way. Well, why are they looking at it differently? Come on, why can't we agree on an action? The Rebbe says because their perspective is based on the source of their souls. And based on where your soul is coming from, you see things differently. In a sense, we say we all come from 600,000 root souls. Even deeper than that, there's 70 root souls. Even deeper than that, there's 7 root souls. Even deeper than that, there's 3. There's the side of kindness, the side of judgment, and the middle road of compassion, of truth. And depending on which one of these your soul emerged, you literally see things differently. Like the classic protagonists of Hillel and Shammai both incredibly great, incredibly holy, incredibly immersed in Torah. But Hillel saw everything through the prism of kindness, the roots of his soul. And Shammai saw everything through the roots of discernment, of discrimination, of holding back, the roots of his soul. Of course, when we understand more deeply, we know it's really the conflict between potential and actual. And Hillel, from Become Kindness, is celebrating the actual, what we have in our hand. And Shammai, in a sense, sees more deeply, sees differently, sees the potential of everything. They're seeing it differently. So if we look at action differently, the Rebbe says, we're not talking about action in Tanya. Tanya is not teaching you the laws of Shabbos or the laws of kosher or the laws of modest dress. Tanya is coming to inspire your heart, to ignite your mind, to release your soul. We're talking about nuances of inner dimensions of emotion, feeling, spiritual energy. Well, if we can't be on the same page for action, we could be on the same page for the inner world, the world of the spirit, the world of the feelings. Remember, we said this is what our sages call a kal v'chomer, from a lighter situation to a more severe or strict situation. If we can't all agree in the realm of action, which is a lighter situation seemingly because we should be able to agree on the realm of action, for sure in a more strict, intense situation, meaning the inner dimension, the realm of spirit, the realm of nuance, of thought, of feeling, for sure, we're not going to be on the same page. So then how in the world could one work aimed at our heart and mind and soul, aimed at that inner world, how could it possibly work? That's how we leave the second section of this letter. Let me read this inside. We're towards the end. So we are on page Daled, the second of these 3 pages of the introduction of the letter sent, Hakdamas HaMalaket. We're on the literally the top line. So now the Rebbe is explaining why is it that even on the realm of action we don't agree. And souls that are rooted in the attribute of kindness, their behavior is also so, to turn toward kindness, to be more lenient, etc. Meaning, a Hillel soul sees everything through that prism of kindness, not, God forbid, distorting the law, not trying to be unfaithful to the law, but this is how he sees the law. In our days, we have a famous rabbinic figure, Reb Moshe Feinstein, Zichrono Livracha. He was a great, great, great Rav, a great rabbi, who was famous for finding leniencies. Now, that doesn't mean he was chilled. He was not so careful about law. He had less God-fearing qualities. Not at all. He was very God-fearing, very pious. I can tell you stories about his personal piety that would be unbelievable to you. But he saw things through the paradigm of the source of his soul, which was clearly not that prophetic spirit, but I am sure from the realm of kindness, the right side, Hillel. And therefore, when he looked at Torah, he would find, through Torah, leniency. For those of you that remember Rabbi Shfrei, Zichrono Livracha, the same. He saw things always with such an eye of kindness because that's who he was. So it's not that they're twisting the law. It's not that they're manipulating the law. It's not that they're trying to make loopholes in the law. No, this is sincerely how they see it because of the source of their soul. So therefore, the Rebbe is saying, because of the source of our soul, we can't even agree on action. Because if your soul is sourced in one place, you see the law differently than if your soul is sourced in a very different space in God's energies. All legit, all God, right? We gave the proof text last week. Elu ve'elu, these and these, divrei Elokim Chaim, are the words of the living God. And we said Elokim Chaim, that's plural. There's not more than one God. It should be Elokah Chai. But we explained that it's referencing the source of the souls of the Jewish people. And because of that multiplicity of sources, it's Elokim Chaim. But what are we hearing, bottom line, from this quote from our sages? It's all true. These and these are the words of the living God. This is true, and this is true. This is godly, this is godly. This is part of God's Torah, this is part of God's Torah. In the end of the day, there's the law, how we have to behave. But in the theoretical, looking at all the beautiful prisms and aspects, it's all part of God's vision. It's all part of God's Torah. It's all true. So again, why are we going into this? Because if it doesn't even work that on the realm of action, we have naturally a unified voice. We just have to make a vote and follow the majority rule. But naturally, intuitively, we see things so differently. How much more so in the realm of the spirit? Kenoida, as is known. The kol shekain v'kal v'chaimer. So as we said, how much more so? Kal v'chaimer. From an easier situation of an action which we should be able to agree to a much harder situation of the inner world where we already understand we're not going to agree. When we're talking about the secrets only known to God, because we're talking about the inner aspect of our feelings, of our thoughts, of our soul. For sure here, we know we are so different. What do I mean by the secrets of God? Well, these are love of God and fear of God. That's found in the mind and heart of each and every one of us according to their ability. And this is a critical point that I was saying. Again, intensifying the kal v'chaimer from the lighter situation that it should work and still doesn't, how much more so to the stricter situation where we already know it's not going to work. So not only is it, an action's an action, to an inner feeling and thought and inspiration, it's more than that, the Rebbe is saying here. We all are equally obligated in the actions. You can't say, sometimes we say this, but it's not a legit excuse to say, I'm not holding by that. I'm not up to that. God gave us 613. I think I'm going to maybe keep like 200. Of course, nowadays we can only keep about a third because of technical reasons. But we can't choose and say, I know God wants this, but not for my soul. Not for me. Not for this lifetime. No. We might say it, but it's not true. It's not valid. Every single Jew has a spiritual ability and the obligation to keep every single commandment. All the biblical, all the rabbinic, all the customs, no exemptions. We all are obligated. But that's not so when we speak of love and fear of God, which is how the Rebbe basically defined the nistaros, the hidden inner dimension. Because remember, bottom line, Tanya is about bringing us to love and fear of God. If you want to understand in one concept, what is the Alter Rebbe's goal in Tanya? It's on the table. He wants every Jew to absolutely love and absolutely fear God, because through this, we will serve God completely. Why am I saying it's different in love and fear? Don't we all have an obligation to love God? Don't we all have an obligation to fear God? Is that not a commandment? It is a commandment. And we all are obligated. We all must love God. We all must fear God. But we all don't have the same obligation. What's the difference? It's based on your soul abilities. Every one of us has to love God. But how deeply, how intently, how much? God knows. As much as the abilities he gave you. And similarly with fear, with awe. We all have to fear God. But how deeply, how intently, and how high the ladder of levels of fear, as we discuss in Tanya, depends on the source of your soul. So in terms of keeping Shabbos, the greatest, holiest Jew, and me and you, we have the same obligations. It might not seem like, come on. No, we have the same obligations. We have the exact same obligations. But in terms of loving God and fearing God, we don't have the same obligations. In terms of loving God and fearing God, we are obligated as per the level of our soul, as per our personal ability. So what do? Well, do your max. Am I off the hook entirely? Never. It's a commandment. Every Jew can love God. Every Jew can fear God. But how high, how deep, how intense? As per the gifts God gave you. So again, this intensifies the kal v'chaimer. First we said kal is an action, and we can't agree. How much more so an inner dimension, we're not going to agree. Now we're saying, and additionally, Kal. This is the action that we're all equally responsible for, is incumbent on every one of us, and we still can't agree. Well, how much more so the development of love and fear when it's not the same for every one of us. In a legalistic way, it's not the same for every one of us. Every Jew has their own unique ability to have a relationship with God. And how much does God expect from you? Exactly as per the gifts he gave you. You might not know them, but God definitely does. He will know exactly how far you can go in your love, exactly how deep you can go in your fear, and that's what he wants from you. As the Rebbe continues to explain, L'fuma de misha'er beliba, according to what you can evaluate in your heart. Every one of us has to evaluate ourselves, evaluate our sensitivities, evaluate how much we resonate with loving and fearing, how much we can work and pull out more and more. And as deep, as intense, as close to God as we can get, that's what we must do. As the Zohar learns out on a verse, Noida Bisharim Baila. Well, what does that mean? And what does that have to do with anything? Now, again, this is Zohar. Zohar is Kabbalah. So it means her husband is known in the gates, which means if we unpack these words, got 3 Hebrew words here. Noida, Basha'arim, Baila. This is Zohar. This is Kabbalah. So each of these words have esoteric meanings, decontextualized, stripped away from the physical husband known gates. We're not talking about any of those physical things. Noida, to know. To know is like the Kabbalistic and Hasidic concept of da'as. Chachma, Bina, da'as, Chabad. Da'as is not knowledge, as we will discuss in chapter 3. Da'as is connectivity. Da'as is when you have acquired the knowledge of God, becoming one with it, internalization, integration, to produce the emotions. We learn through utilizing and activating our chachma and bina, our seminal wisdom and understanding. And when we completely understand the concept of God, we activate the third intellectual quality called da'as, which really is connectivity, becoming one with a concept. And as we become one with the concept, we feel. We feel love of God. We feel fear of God. Which love, which fear? Okay, that's already chapter 4 of Tanya, when we explain which thoughts and which concepts triggered by the connectivity, what emotion or outcome there will be. But there will be one. That's the product from the intellect, the real intellect, the contemplative intellect, to a real, true emotional response. So da'as means the emotion that comes from your connection to these godly concepts, your love and fear of God. So noida is known, da'as, connectivity, deeply integrating the concept to produce an emotional response. Basha'arim, again, in the surface, it means the gates. But another word, another translation of sha'arim, sha'ar means evaluation, estimation, like you're evaluating something to see its worth. So noida, the love and fear, basha'arim, as per what is evaluated, as per the depth within one's heart, ba'ala, toward her husband. The husband of every Jew is God. Every Jew, male and female. We're all God's wife, God's bride, God's mother, God's sister, God's daughter. We have multiple roles. But a very classic way we define the relationship is God is the groom and we are the bride. We began our marriage, the first legal stage of our marriage, by the giving of the Torah, some 3,300 plus years ago. And the consummation of that marriage, of course, is Mashiach, the redemption. So that's our relationship with God. Baila, her husband. We've been legally married and waiting for him to come, or he's waiting for us, or we're waiting for him, or a bit of both for a long time. But it's already Baila. It's already our husband. So Noida B'Sh'arim Baila, the degree of love and fear, Basha'arim, as per the evaluation of the depth of your heart and soul, Baila, for her husband, for God. So what did we get from this verse? That the verse is saying, as per the explanation of the Zohar, Kabbalah, Hasidic thought also, every one of us has a different noida, has a different ability to love and fear based on Basha'arim, based on the evaluation, the estimation of the depth of heart, of mind, of soul, how much we can have toward Baila, toward the husband, toward God. So therefore, the Rebbe is concluding, you guys are absolutely right. You're saying, I'm sending out the Tanya. We are actually making it very official and we're printing it. And you're like, this isn't going to work for us. And the Rebbe says, you got a very good point. Intellectually, you might not be able to get it. Emotionally, you might not be able to get it. And even if your emotions and intellect are in a good place and you're walking in the light and not in the darkness, how can I make it work for all of you? Maybe some. All of you? What's going on? That is how we end this longest section of this letter. Tremendous affirmation of all of the fears and hesitations of the Hasidim, of the followers of the Rebbe.
It's funny because I just responded to somebody's post today, Chabadnik from Israel, and he said that the number one mitzvah for us is to love God. And so I responded by saying that I learned to love God by learning Tanya. And it really does teach you how to love God with all your heart.
That's exactly the goal of the Alter Rebbe. He wants you to love God with all your heart, and that's exactly why he wrote the Tanya. That's exactly
and trust Him. Yeah. When you trust God, then you love Him.
Definitely, very, very, very interwoven. So, what do you think if you had been there? If you had been there before the Alter Rebbe writes this letter, do you think you would have been from those Hasidim saying, no, don't print that book? Or would you have said, oh, this is great. It'll be so accessible, all the wisdom of the Rebbe. What do you think you would have been thinking? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we would say put it on YouTube.
Exactly. We would. The more accessible, the better. Yeah, a book. What about a disc, a cassette, a thumbnail? Give it to us every way you can. And yet we can understand that in a different era, they did look at things very differently. I happen to agree with Chava. I happen to think that most of us probably, that we can understand what they were feeling, but we just are wired very differently. And we'd be like, any way, any tool, make it as accessible as you can, user friendly, please. But let's say you had those thoughts, sort of vague in your head, like a lot of fear is sort of vague, just this vague, unlettered, unarticulated, but just like a sense of like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's going to be the same. It feels like it's going to change our relationship. And then the Rebbe sends you a letter to all of his followers. And you, of course, as a devout follower, study this letter very well. What would you be thinking now when you finish this section?
Did he give private audiences at all to women?
Very interesting question. Not really.
Well, then women would want to have the book.
So we would read the paragraph and we'd say, it's okay. We still want the book. It's interesting. We do see some stories with the Tzemach Tzedek, with the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, because in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, it was a really hard time for Russian Jewry. Financially, tremendous difficulties and persecution, but a lot of financial pressures that led to a lot of situations of agunos, of women whose husbands were gone. So we do have stories via those agunos of women actually having, indirectly perhaps, those types of private audiences with the Rebbe. It was the Rebbe Rayatz. okay, whose birthday and day of redemption we're celebrating. As far as I know, the first Rebbe, not only the first Rebbe of Chabad, I believe the first Hasidic leader and perhaps the first religious leader, perhaps, that literally gave a talk dedicated to women. That's going back only one generation. This was in the 1930s in Riga. This was in honor of this group of young women that were studying Hasidus. And that was very radical. And when they wanted to, it was considered like, whoa, that's not for you. And the Rebbe Rayatz actually very much encouraged their study of Hasidus. And as the Rebbe explains, the Rebbe Rayatz knew we have to bring Mashiach. And he knows that women are the catalyst to bring Mashiach. So therefore, he wanted to empower women and give them the tools to bring Mashiach, which definitely is through the study of Hasidus. So he is the first Rebbe that I know that spoke, like so to speak, giving a talk directed to women. He also had women in private audiences. I don't know if any of the Rebbeim before did that like as a regular thing. There might have been exceptions, but I don't know if anyone did it regularly before the Rebbe Rayatz. And again, here we're talking about like, let's say in the 1930s in Europe. So Fruma says, we would have read the paragraph, we would have said, it's fine. We're glad we have the book. We can't come for a private audience. Thank you for the book. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on what people would have thought after they read this paragraph?
So I think because like we're in a time period where like it's very normal to see sichos of the Rebbe directed at women and people women going for dollars. Like it's not unusual, the idea of women going for yechidus for us. So I think I can at the same time, but I deeply appreciate having Tanya and that when I was first becoming firm, I was like, oh, this is so organized and this is so available. But at the same time, I think I can kind of understand what was the fear, perhaps, of the Hasidim at the time. Like, what? You mean there's no Yechidus anymore? Like, I can't actually tell you what's on my mind at the moment. I'm going to have to figure out how to apply what's in the book. And what if there's something that I can't find in the book? And what if I'm too emotionally distraught to be able to look in the book? So like
Exactly.
I can understand. Like, and we do this also. Like we write to the Rebbe, we visit the OL. We're like, I need a more specific answer than I can find by looking through the Sichos and the Maimarim. They're wonderful and they're fantastic, but I need something more specific right now.
Yeah. So having all those thoughts, if you go back to the 1700s, read this part of the letter, how would you feel after reading how the Rebbe articulates and puts into words and cognitive thought what was just sort of like a vague fear in your head? What would you be thinking?
I think I'd probably be thinking like, okay, so you're going to tell me why this is not the case, or you're going to tell me how you're going to solve these problems. I'm glad you understand me at least.
I'm glad you're affirming me, but I'm a little suspicious. Where are you going with this?
Yeah.
So where is the Rebbe going with this? And honestly, it's not written anywhere, or I have never found a source that explains why when the Rebbe is writing this letter specifically to respond to people's fears, and I think Rivka articulated very well those fears, why does he do this? Why does he spend the longest part of the letter saying, I get it far better than you why this book should not work? So I can just give you my feelings. And I think they're twofold when I look at this and wonder in my head, so what were the Hasidim supposed to gain from this? And why is he writing all this? Yes, it's affirmation. We're giving emotional support, but what's he doing? One thing I always come away with is just this feeling. This is just my feeling. I haven't seen it explained anywhere. That when the Rebbe so, as throughout the entire Tanya, logically structured explanation, very clear, lots of scaffolding here, very well building his case, is showing how a book cannot work. And then the next paragraph he says, but this does. Like, that's it. It does. I know you all so well. It does. And to me, every time I just have that like, wow, of the greatness of the Tanya. Because the same Rebbe who's saying why the book shouldn't work, and I understand better than you why the book shouldn't work, that same Rebbe is telling us, and I'm telling you, this does. And in this next section, which is shorter, the Rebbe says such incredible phrases about the power of the Tanya. And again, it's not like me talking, It's not like us conversing casually and, sometimes we get a little extreme in our language or exaggerated hyperbole. No! The Rebbe means every word he's writing. And the words he writes about the power of the Tanya, which he just finished explaining is impossible, yet it does. To me, when I come away from this paragraph, I think it just heightens and intensifies my appreciation for the Tanya, not only as the master guide for the Jewish people, the master guide for our emotional connection to God, but the impossible guide, the guide that shouldn't be and can't be and it won't be. And yet the Rebbe says it is. Another aspect, as the Rebbe writes in the next paragraph, the beginning of the next paragraph, but the Rebbe says, I know you all so well. I know you all so well. It shouldn't work a book, but since I really know you, I know the nuances of your soul. So I was able to write you into this book. I was able to write the book for you. For who? Well, as the Rebbe says, for every single Jew, until the coming of Mashiach and beyond, right? So I know so well every single Jew, what every single soul needs. Oh yeah, because we're cookie cutters. No, the Rebbe told us we are not cookie cutters. That's the blessing of Chacham HaRazim, the wise one of the secrets. That's Joshua's praise, because there's no cookie cutters here. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different. And the Rebbe says, I know you so well. Klal Yisrael, Jews, I know you so well. I wrote you into the book. I wrote your answers. I wrote your guide in this book. We'll start reading the next paragraph where the Rebbe says that. But again, he never addresses. He, so to speak, created the sense of the impossibility of a book working, and he never refutes that. He never comes back and shows why the logic there is flawed and why a book can work. He never does that. He just sort of washes it all away with, I know you so well, this works. So how does it work? How does it work if we all are so different and unique, and we're 21st century America? We live lives they couldn't have envisioned in the times of the Alter Rebbe. If you think, just like a simple example, a little bit of the history, that the Alter Rebbe lived during the time of Napoleon. And Napoleon was the conqueror, right? Like all those type of people who want to conquer the world, and we're going to be the leader of the world. History has seen many of them come and go. And he has washed through Western Europe, but now he's coming to Russia. And in Russia, the religious leaders were very divided on who do we want to win? Like, if we have our choice, Russia, the cruel, vicious Tsarist regime, or Napoleon, who's promising freedom for the Jewish people. And the Alter Rebbe saw it very clearly that we want the cruel, vicious Tsars to win. Not for one second doubting their cruelty, doubting their Jew hatred, doubting, in those days, of course, anti-Semitic wasn't the word yet, but we'll use it, doubting their hatred of us. He very much wanted the Tsars to win, and he did everything he could, physically and spiritually, and perhaps giving up his life was part of what he did to ensure that the Tsars would win. Why? Because he knew that if Napoleon wins, the Jews will have it much easier. There will be freedom. He's not just talking. He will give emancipation to the Jews, and their hearts will stray from God. And if the Tsars win, and the persecution and oppression and grinding poverty will continue, and I'm sure he saw what was going to be the Kantonistim, that horrific decree, looking at all that he said, but the hearts of the Jews will stay close to God. So in the times of the Alter Rebbe, he was literally terrified of Napoleon and the freedom he was offering the Jews, because he knew it was a freedom from God. Now think of us, 21st century America, the freedoms we have, the opportunities we have. We have far more than Napoleon would ever have given the Jews. And we have a relationship with God, and we dedicate our lives to God. So the Alter Rebbe was wrong? No, he wasn't wrong at all. It's a different world. It's a world fast forwarding toward Mashiach, and there's a lot of energies out there, and we can do things now that we couldn't have done then. And we can handle this freedom and channel this freedom and utilize this freedom to serve God. It's a different world. So if it's such a different world, how does the Tanya work? He's writing it for the Jews. We want to say for all the Jews then? All right. Let's be big believers and say for all the Jews then. How is he writing it for us today? When if our ancestors are looking down from heaven at us, they might not know that we're Jewish. They might not know that we're religious. They might not see it because our lives just look so, so different. So again, this is just from my thoughts. I want to share briefly a story that to me connects to this idea. How does the Tanya work? What's the secret? So this is a story with the Alter Rebbe. It's a famous story. I will say it briefly for the benefit of those that know it, the benefit of time. It's a story that very much resonates with me. So the Alter Rebbe, again, he's living in a time when the Hasidic movement is a bit of a newbie, new kid on the block. He's already the third generation, but still. And there's a lot of opposition. And a lot of the opposition came from, believe it or not, the Torah scholars, the scholars of the Talmud. People that dedicated their life to God and his Torah. They had a lot of fear, and we're not going to go into now why, because that would be another long explanation. But bottom line, if you want to go back to Shabtai Tzvi or other issues, or the fact that the Baal Shem Tov was saying statements about the preciousness of the simple Jew, meaning not any less than the Torah scholars, so maybe it's dishonoring Torah and dishonoring the scholars, various reasons. Some things they heard that were true, many things they heard were not true, and a lot of suspicion, a lot of skepticism, negative feelings, and much worse than that towards the Hasidic movement. So this is the arena the Alter Rebbe is in. Now here's the Alter Rebbe, who is brilliant, and he's devoted his entire life to Torah. So he's brilliant in the Kabbalistic realm, brilliant in Hasidus, and brilliant in the revealed portions of Torah, in Talmud and in law. The Alter Rebbe wrote a Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law. So he's got everything. So this Alter Rebbe sends a message to a town called Shklov. And he says, I'm coming to town. Now, Shklov was a city that loved learning Torah, that loved learning Talmud, that loved learning Gemara. That was the city. All of the people were so into Torah study, and all the people were very skeptical about this Hasidic movement. And they get this message from the Alter Rebbe, and they're very torn. On one hand, he's a leader of that cult. We don't want him in our town. But they say he's really brilliant. They say he's a real scholar of Talmud. We'd love to hear from a brilliant scholar of Talmud. Remember, Chava, this is before YouTube. They couldn't download anything. If you heard a concept, you went to the sage and got it straight. Or maybe from someone who heard it from someone who heard it. We'd love to study Torah from him. We'd love to have him resolve all of our questions on the Talmud. But he's part of that cult. So what do we do? So the sages of Shklov decided this is what they were going to do. Each one of them was going to prepare their most difficult question, their hardest question, and they all had questions. The hardest question they had, and they were going to present it to him. And if he could answer all of their questions, they were ready to hear from him. He could teach them Torah. They would accept. And if he can't answer their questions, they're going to kick him out of town in, as we say, tar and feather. Okay? That's the challenge. Alter Rebbe comes. All of the scholars are lined up in this massive hall of Torah study, a base medrash, in order as per their age and Torah knowledge. from beginning all the way to the end. And the Alter Rebbe goes up to the podium. He turns to the first, oldest, most venerable person who spends a long time explaining his question, and then gets quiet and is waiting for the Alter Rebbe's response, and the Alter Rebbe doesn't respond. He says, okay, next. And then the second, next. And then the third, next. And the room is like, there's a lot of tension building. Like, what is he doing? Is he making a joke out of us? What are we, over 100 people here? And we're all saying our questions, and then he's going to answer all 100, go back? Like, and then, like, what's he doing? But they didn't say anything. Every single person in the room asked his question. And then, after every person asked their question, the Alter Rebbe began to sing. He sang a nigun, a wordless melody. And as he sang the nigun, everyone in the room felt inside of themselves they were raised to a new level of self, to a new level of understanding, to a new level of mind-soul integration. And every one of them knew the answer to their question. Through that wordless melody, the Alter Rebbe answered all of their questions. And they recognized that. And then he gave over to them the messages that he wanted to tell the town. And after he left, several of the younger scholars of Shklov decided and consulted with even an older person that agreed with them that they were leaving Shklov and going to study at the feet of the Alter Rebbe. That he had made such an enormous, enormous impact of the town because truly he answered every one of their questions. So maybe that's part of the journey of Tanya. As we study Tanya and as we immerse ourselves in the thoughts of Tanya, Tanya's opening up our own inner spiritual powers. And as our minds are opened and our hearts are opened and our souls are opened, we know the answer to our questions. We actually know those answers. Now, Rivka said before, she could sort of understand what they're saying because she has a question and she's going to look in a talk, she's going to look in a discourse, but she wants the answer to her question and it's not written like in those letters. But when you go through this process, when you go through this journey, there's an opening. And we actually do find the answers to our question. And that's the enormous, enormous light the Alter Rebbe put in the Tanya. And any other questions or thoughts, or we will continue. We'll start the next section. Okay. So now we're getting to not a refutation of everything we said before. We are just like moving on and saying again, maybe now with a very heightened awareness of, wow, it so shouldn't work. And it does. Wow. Already we're beginning with a different opening, a different inner opening to the power of the Tanya. So the Rebbe says, but, the big but after all this, B'yoda'a umakirai kaminahem. All of you are people I know very, very well. All of you are people that I'm very close to. I understand the nuances of your mind and heart and soul. You're all different, but I know every single one of you. Kol echad ve'echad me'anash. Every single person, remember we said that term anash, anshe shlomenu, the men of our people, the followers of the Alter Rebbe, what we call today Chabad or Lubavitch. Sheb'medinosenu, in our area, v'smucho shela, and in the adjoining areas. As I had mentioned before, after the passing of the Maggid of Mezrich, his followers, the Chavraya Kedisha, the inner circle of disciples, divided among themselves the areas of the Hasidic communities. And each person was great tzaddik, a very, very, very holy, godly person, was given a different area that he is responsible for those souls, for those Jews. And the Alter Rebbe was also given an area. He was actually given very specifically an area where there was a lot of the Talmudic study going on from the opposition because they knew that was his forte. He was given his area, but his area was getting bigger and bigger. Why? Well, we said because some of the other Chavraya Kadisha, some of the other people, these great tzaddikim, these holy, holy Jews, some of them were forced out of town. like Reb Lev Yitzchak of Berditchev, who was actually very, very close to the Alter Rebbe, he had to run away. So who's responsible for his area? It became subsumed in the Alter Rebbe's territory. Or Reb Menachem Mendel of Haradak, who also the Alter Rebbe was very, very close to and looked as a older friend, as someone he could turn to. He moved to Eretz Yisrael. Well, what happened to his area? What happened to those souls? Who's taking responsibility? It became subsumed in the Alter Rebbe's area. So over time, the Alter Rebbe's area is growing and growing and growing, which is a good thing, but which is on the practical level creating a certain time issue, as the Rebbe says. But first, he tells us more. Now, all of these people in my ever-growing area, you would come to me, and we had such words of love between ourselves. We're so close. I understand each one of you so well. I knew exactly what to say for each one of your hearts and souls. That's what we had until now. And every one of you revealed to me what was going on in your minds and in your hearts, in your service of God. You told it to me, and I guided each one of you very, very individually, as per your needs, as per your capacity. Hataluya balev, because service of God goes back to the heart. As we were explaining, that we all have to keep the same Shabbos, but our feeling for God, our love and our awe and our fear, for each one of us is going to be very different. And the Alter Rebbe knows. He knows each person. He knows how far their hearts can go. He knows how to ignite those hearts, those minds, those souls, to each person a very, very personalized, loving way. Alehem titov milsi. So to you people that are so hesitant about this book, my words should flow. Ulshoni eit sefer. And my tongue should be like the pen of the scribe. Meaning these very poetic words. As we said, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya with a lot of beauty of language. But what he's saying here is, you know my words. My words are right here. As I spoke to you, it's right here. Right here in each of these printed words that you will read. That's for everyone. It's for you. For each one of you. It's not for everyone. It's for you. B'kuntresim elu, in these pamphlets, Hanikuram b'shem Lekutei Amarim, that I called Lekutei Amarim. Remember, the Rebbe, with his tremendous humility, he doesn't call himself the author. He's the compiler. He's the editor. And he doesn't call this work by the name, so to speak. He calls it Lekutei Amarim, a likut, a collection of statements. Things I've read, things I've heard. I gathered them all together for you, of 20 years of intense work with such a brilliant mind, so steeped in Torah, so steeped in God. 20-year immersion. Gathered some ideas together. I gathered them from where? From where did I gather them? From books, from authors, holy ones, their souls in Eden, the ones we know about, the famous ones. And some are gleaned from secrets the wise will pick up. From the holy letters, he was in a letter discourse, in a letter dialogue with Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Haradak, who was in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rebbe is saying basically, I know you, I love you, I understand you, I've got history, you know that's true. I'm telling you, I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book so you will personally benefit. What did I put in the book? Everything valuable I've ever heard or read. From the sources, as we explained, the writings of the Maharal of Prague, the Shlach HaKadosh, the Rambam, from the teachers, the authors, the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezrich, from the letters from Israel, from Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Haradak, who was already in Israel at this time. I pulled it all together and I wrote it for you. Who's the you? Each Jew. For each and every Jew, you are that you. You are that person I know so well and I love so deeply, and I'm dedicated to bringing you closer to God. That's my reason for being. That's the reason for the Tanya. And you will find your soul, your needs in this work. We will stop here. Next week, we will read. The Rebbe writes, what is the power and strength of the Tanya? So here's the Rebbe, who on one hand is so humble that this work that he spent 20 years writing and 3+ years giving over orally to the Hasidim, he doesn't call himself the author of. He's the Malake. He's the compiler. Gathered together some nice ideas. That same person is writing down, so he said it, nobody can deny this. It's written. The unbelievable power that he knows he put in this work. And that, to be continued, is what we'll begin with, God willing, next week.